How did Native Americans manage to survive the harshest winter conditions without relying on firewood? The methods they employed are still incredibly impressive, even by today's standards. Imagine the seemingly endless plains of North America, gripped by intense frost and blanketed in deep snow. The temperatures can plummet to extreme lows, and the unrelenting wind can chill you to the very core. For millennia, people thrived in this unforgiving environment without the benefits of central heating, modern insulation, or, in many regions, even a sufficient supply of firewood. Their ability to survive in the midst of this icy wasteland seems almost miraculous. These people did more than just endure the cold. They actually learned to harness it to their advantage, transforming the very laws of physics into their allies. Their homes, their clothing, and their entire way of life were part of an ingenious system, meticulously refined to perfection in the crucible of some of the planet's most brutal winters. They possessed secrets that allowed them to conserve precious warmth and greet each new day, despite nature's relentless fury. This is not a tale of constant struggle, but rather a story of harmony and profound understanding of the world around them. Stick around until the end of this video, and you'll discover how entire communities flourished in conditions that we, in modern times, would deem completely uninhabitable. You'll also learn about the engineering solutions that allowed them to sleep soundly through the fiercest blizzards. What if I told you that everything you thought you knew about battling the cold was just the tip of the iceberg? The survival of indigenous people hinged not so much on their ability to generate heat, but rather on their extraordinary ability to retain it. They possessed an intuitive understanding of the fundamental principles of thermodynamics. The most effective insulator remains air, and their genius lay in identifying and utilizing natural materials that could trap the maximum amount of air within their volume. They developed multi-layered systems, where each layer had a specific function, effectively capturing and immobilizing pockets of air. This was essentially natural nanotechnology at work on a macroscopic scale. One of the most remarkable and unique materials they used was cattail fluff, gathered from along rivers and lakes. This incredibly lightweight and silky substance boasts exceptional insulating properties that surpass many modern materials. It was used as padding in winter shoes and to line clothing, providing virtually weightless yet remarkably effective protection. Another key element was dried grass and moss, which they packed into the spaces between layers of clothing and within the walls of their dwellings. The slender, hollow stems of the grass created countless air pockets, preventing the movement of cold air. It was a readily available, simple, and renewable resource that was literally at their feet. They also skillfully used animal skins, but not just in the way we typically imagine. While the fur was important, the skin itself, when properly treated, became an effective barrier against the wind. The combination of a thick, wind-proof outer layer of skin with a fluffy fur or other insulating material on the inside created an ideal form of protection. Even snow, the very symbol of winter, became an ally in their quest for warmth. They understood that freshly fallen loose snow contains a large amount of air and serves as an excellent insulator. Therefore, they would surround the bases of their homes with high snowdrifts, shielding them from the wind and preventing heat from escaping through the lower parts of the walls. This philosophy of conserving rather than producing heat permeated every aspect of their lives. It required keen observation, patience, and a deep respect for the gifts of nature. Each element of their daily routine was part of a cohesive and well-thought-out energy conservation system. They didn't try to conquer winter. They became part of it, utilizing its own laws to their advantage. It was an invisible shield, woven from air, down, grass, and snow that reliably protected them from the most severe frosts. Their homes weren't just shelters. They were complex thermal devices, working in complete harmony with the surrounding environment. Instead of burning massive amounts of fuel to heat vast spaces, they created a microclimate directly around themselves. This was a strategy of minimalism and efficiency that is becoming increasingly relevant once again today. Their experience proves that the most ingenious solutions are often the simplest. We're eager to hear your thoughts. What do you think about this approach to insulation, which relies on the use of unconventional natural materials? Share your opinions in the comments below. And be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next installments of our research. Are you ready to uncover the truth about the most iconic dwelling of Native Americans? At first glance, the tepee of the Great Plains tribes might seem like a simple shelter made of poles and skins, hardly capable of providing protection from the winter cold. However, this elegant conical structure is actually an engineering marvel, perfectly adapted to the harsh climate. The secret to its stability and warmth lies in the details, refined over centuries of careful observation. The conical shape made the dwelling incredibly wind-resistant, allowing even hurricane-force winds to flow around it rather than pressing against its walls. The slight backward lean of the cone further enhanced this effect, pressing the entire structure firmly against the ground. The base of the tepee consisted of a frame of 15 to 20 long, straight pine poles. Erecting this frame was an art form in itself. 3 or 4 main support poles were tied together, and the remaining poles were placed against them in a specific order. This created a strong and stable structure capable of supporting the weight of heavy roofing and snow loads. The tepee covering was made from carefully sewn together bison hides. A single covering could weigh over 220 pounds and require 12 to 20 hides. Properly tanned and sewn, it became almost completely waterproof and completely windproof, which was absolutely crucial on the open plains. But the main secret to the tepee's thermal efficiency lay hidden inside. An additional lining of thinner, tanned hides was attached to the inside of the poles, stopping about 1.5 feet short of the ground. This detail created an air gap between the outer wall and the interior lining. Working on the same principle as a modern thermos, this inner lining served another important function. Cold air that penetrated under the outer edge of the covering didn't rush into the living space as an icy draft. Instead, it rose smoothly upward in the gap between the 2 layers of skins, mixing with the warm air from the hearth and creating a constant, adjustable draft. The hearth was not located in the exact center of the tepee, but was positioned slightly off-center, closer to the entrance. This thoughtful design allowed smoke to escape more efficiently through a special opening at the top. The smoke hole was equipped with 2 adjustable flaps, allowing the inhabitants to regulate the draft and protect the hearth from rain and snow. The floor inside the tepee was covered with skins and sometimes dry grass, providing additional insulation from the frozen ground. Sleeping areas were located around the perimeter, on slightly raised platforms, or simply on thick layers of furs. People slept with their feet facing the fire, ensuring that heat was evenly distributed throughout their bodies. Even the entrance to the tepee was cleverly designed. It was always located on the east side to shield the dwelling from the prevailing westerly winds. The low and narrow opening was closed with a special skin curtain, minimizing heat loss when entering and exiting. Thus, the tepee was much more than just a dwelling. It was a complex climatic system. It retained heat, provided ventilation, and offered protection from the wind, all while remaining completely mobile. This unique combination of qualities made it the ideal home for the nomadic lifestyle of the Great Plains tribes. But how did those who built their homes to last for generations, unable to move to warmer climates, survive? Are you ready to discover how entire villages transformed into a single warm communal organism in the next chapter? What I'm about to reveal will completely challenge your preconceived notions about ancient Native American buildings as being primitive. In the northeastern part of the North American continent, in a region of dense deciduous forests and long snowy winters with temperatures plummeting to below 22 degrees Fahrenheit, the peoples of the Iroquois Confederacy developed an entirely different, revolutionary architectural concept for housing. They didn't construct mobile, conical tents like nomadic tribes, but rather monumental, stationary longhouses that served not only as dwellings for families, but also as true social and thermal centers for entire maternal clans of dozens of people. These weren't mere tents. They were full-fledged wooden buildings capable of standing in one place for decades. These impressive structures ranged from 65 to almost 200 feet in length and 20 to 26 feet in width. They were built from a strong, flexible frame of young elm trunks as thick as a person's arm. The trees were deliberately bent into uniform arches, creating a vaulted, tunnel-shaped roof, which made the structure incredibly strong and resistant to heavy snow loads in the winter. The wooden frame was completely covered with large sheets of thick elm or ash bark, carefully laid in an overlapping pattern like modern tiles to provide waterproofing. Bark was a natural roofing material that was both waterproof and insulating, readily available in abundance in the forest at no cost. The secret to the longhouse's high thermal efficiency lay in its scale and the communal lifestyle of the tribe. Up to 20 related families, as many as 100 people, could live in one such massive house simultaneously, and the heat naturally emitted by the living bodies of dozens of people as they breathed and moved became a significant additional source of biological heating. It was a living, self-heating organism that warmed itself from within through collective metabolism. Each person generated approximately 100 watts of heat, and 100 people provided 10 kilowatts of free heating around the clock without the need for any fuel. Along the central wide passageway of the house, several open hearths were strategically located at equal distances of several feet from each other, usually from 3 to 10, depending on the length of the longhouse. The smoke from these hearths naturally rose upward and escaped through special ventilation holes in the roof, which could be partially covered with movable sheets of bark to regulate the draft and provide protection from precipitation. This distributed system of multiple hearths made it possible to maintain fires in several places at once, evenly distributing precious heat throughout the entire length of the huge building, eliminating any cold spots. Each family had access to its own hearth, but all the hearths together created a single heating system for the entire space. The family's living quarters were arranged in an orderly fashion on both sides of the central common passageway, like compartments on a train. Each family occupied its own designated section, approximately 10 feet wide, which functionally consisted of 2 vertical levels. The lower level, on the ground, served as a place for sitting and working during the day, for cooking, repairing tools, and socializing. The upper level, consisting of wide wooden platforms at a height of about 3 feet, was used exclusively for the entire family to sleep on skins and blankets. This vertical division of space was an effective use of volume. 2-tiered living saved space and took advantage of the difference in temperature at different heights. These elevated sleeping platforms were a key engineering element of the heat conservation and comfort system. They raised people above the cold earth and floor, where, according to the laws of physics, the coldest and densest air accumulated due to convection. In addition, warm, lighter air from the burning hearths rose and accumulated under the vaulted roof, naturally warming those sleeping on the upper tier of platforms. Sleeping upstairs meant sleeping in the warmest area of the house. Each foot of height added degrees of temperature due to air stratification, with physics working to enhance comfort. The walls of the longhouse were deliberately multi-layered for maximum insulation. The inner surface of the walls was often additionally covered with woven mats, made of cattail or animal skins around the entire perimeter. This created an additional insulating air layer between the bark and the living space, effectively protecting against drafts penetrating through any inevitable cracks in the bark on the outside. The double wall worked like a thermos. The outer bark blocked wind and moisture. The inner curtain retained heat, and the air between them provided insulation. Food supplies such as corn, beans, pumpkins, and firewood for the winter were stored right inside the longhouse in special vestibules at the end entrances or on high wooden shelves under the roof above the living quarters. This not only reliably protected strategic supplies from the weather and rodents outside, but also created additional significant thermal mass inside. The huge volume of tons of corn, beans, dried meat, and firewood served as a thermal insulator and buffer, stabilizing the temperature inside the longhouse against sudden fluctuations. The supplies weren't just cargo, they were insulation. Each bag of grain was a brick in the wall against the cold. The entrances to the longhouse, located at the ends, were carefully designed on the principle of a vestibule or airlock. They often had a deliberately complex broken shape or were protected by additional woven screens or partitions on the outside. This created a low-pressure buffer zone that physically prevented the icy wind from rushing directly into the living space every time someone entered or exited through the door. The vestibule was a trap for the cold. It remained there, unable to penetrate further into the warm core of the house. Thus, the Iroquois Long House was not just a large wooden building, but a carefully designed, self-sufficient ecosystem for living. It ingeniously combined architectural engineering solutions, the social clan structure of matriarchy, and everyday habits into a single, coordinated mechanism for collective survival in a harsh climate. This communal wooden fortress allowed people to comfortably survive the harshest winters with blizzards, relying simultaneously on the warmth of the hearth and the warmth of each other in the community. Survival was a collective effort, not an individual one. The Longhouse embodied the philosophy of tribal unity. What if I told you that everything you've been taught about winter clothing has been known for centuries? The main secret to protecting yourself from the cold isn't the thickness of your clothing, but rather the right number and combination of layers. Indigenous peoples perfected this principle, creating clothing systems that were warm, lightweight, breathable, and unrestrictive. The foundation of this system was layering. Instead of wearing one thick and heavy piece of clothing, they used several thinner layers. Air was trapped between each layer, and as we already know, air is the best natural insulator. The bottom layer, worn next to the body, was made of thin, soft suede, usually deer or antelope skin, tanned to a fabric-like consistency. This material was pleasant to the touch and absorbed moisture well, wicking it away from the body. This was critically important, as wet skin freezes much faster than dry skin. The second layer consisted of basic clothing, such as shirts, leggings, and dresses. These were also sewn from well-tanned leather, but of a thicker variety. The loose fit of these garments didn't restrict movement and created additional space for an insulating layer of air. The outer clothing consisted of spacious capes and robes, sewn from whole bison hides, with the fur on the inside. The long, thick fur created a powerful insulating layer, and the smooth leather surface on the outside provided excellent protection from the wind. Such a robe was a versatile garment. During the day, it provided protection from the cold, and at night, it transformed into a warm blanket. Special attention was paid to protecting the feet, as they were most often in direct contact with the cold ground and snow. High moccasins were sewn from several layers of durable leather. Insoles made of dry grass or fur were placed inside to provide additional insulation and absorb moisture. Winter moccasins were often made much larger than the foot. This allowed for the wearing of several layers of fabric or fur socks. and the extra space could be filled with additional insulation. The same cattail down or rabbit fur was often used as insulation. Mittens sewn from leather with the fur on the inside were used to protect the hands. Unlike gloves, mittens keep the fingers together, allowing them to warm each other. This simple solution allows for much more effective heat retention in the extremities. The head was protected by hats made of beaver, otter, or other animals with thick, dense fur. Often, the hats had ear flaps that could be lowered during strong winds or when the frost was particularly severe. Sometimes a hood from a robe was thrown over the hat for additional protection. This entire complex system was dynamic and easily adapted to changing conditions. During periods of physical activity, the top layer could be removed to prevent overheating and sweating. During rest or severe frost, on the other hand, it was possible to bundle up more tightly, but even the warmest clothing is useless if there isn't any energy to heat it. In the next chapter, you'll discover what fuel made it possible to keep a fire burning in places where there wasn't a single tree. In the vast expanses of the Great Plains, forests were a rare sight, and in many places, they were completely non-existent. Finding firewood for daily heating and cooking was virtually impossible. This scarcity of the primary source of fuel forced nomadic tribes to find an ingenious and inexhaustible alternative resource. That resource was dried bison dung, commonly known as bison chips. Huge herds of these animals, numbering in the millions, left behind countless amounts of this valuable material. For the inhabitants of the plains, it was like finding dry gold. Collecting dung was an important part of daily life, especially in the period leading up to winter. This task was mainly carried out by women, who stored the dung in special baskets or bags. The collected material was brought back to camp and left to dry in the sun and wind. Completely dried bison dung is a dense, fibrous mass consisting primarily of digested grass. It burns very slowly and evenly, giving off a considerable amount of heat while producing almost no smoke. This quality was especially valuable, as acrid smoke inside a teepee would be a serious problem. Smokeless burning was also an important factor for camouflage. A camp with dozens of such fires burning would be virtually invisible from a distance. This was an advantage both for hunting and in case of military danger. The aroma of burning bison dung was distinctive but not unpleasant. Eyewitnesses described it as a smell similar to dry grass or peat. For people who grew up on the prairie, this smell was an integral part of the comforts of home. The efficiency of this fuel was remarkable. A small pile of chips was enough to keep a fire burning for several hours. This allowed for economical use of supplies and saved time that would otherwise be spent searching for and gathering fuel. The use of dung was part of the waste-free cycle of life on the plains. Bison provided people with almost everything: food, clothing, shelter, and even fuel. It was an ideal system in which humans were fully integrated into the ecosystem around them. Supplies of this fuel were gathered and stored for the entire winter. Large piles of dried dung were stacked next to the teepees. Sometimes they were covered with skins to protect them from snow and moisture. This example demonstrates how inventive indigenous peoples were in utilizing available resources. They recognized value where others would see nothing. The ability to turn animal waste into a major source of heat and energy was key to survival and prosperity on the Great Plains. Ready to learn the shocking truth about how ordinary snow was turned into an impenetrable insulating wall? No matter how perfect the design of a dwelling might be, its thermal efficiency could be significantly improved with simple but ingenious external insulation techniques. The indigenous peoples of the North skillfully used the most accessible natural materials, earth and snow, to create an additional powerful protective barrier around the perimeter of their homes. What Europeans considered an enemy, the Native Americans turned into an ally. Snow wasn't a problem, but a solution to the problem of cold. One of the most common and effective methods of insulation was banking. In the fall, before the onset of severe frosts and snowfalls, the lower part of the walls of the dwelling was methodically covered with a thick layer of turf, loose earth, or heavy stones around the entire perimeter. This deliberately created a thick and dense layer of natural insulation, about 1.5 feet thick, which effectively protected against the piercing wind and cold coming from the frozen ground below. Earth was a free insulator, available everywhere. All you had to do was bend your back and pile it up against the walls. Labor was the only currency. This earth embankment reliably closed all the cracks and gaps in the lower, vulnerable part of the dwelling structure, through which cold air could actively penetrate inside along the perimeter. It also critically prevented deep freezing of the soil directly under the foundation of the dwelling, preserving the relative warmth of the earth. As a result of this insulation, the floor inside remained several degrees warmer than it would have without the embankment. The difference was noticeable to bare feet. A warm floor meant a warm house. The cold came from below, and blocking it at its source was critically important. With the arrival of winter and the first heavy snowfall, this embankment system automatically became even more effective. The snow, which naturally accumulated and was blown by the wind onto the earth embankment at the base, created an additional thick layer of excellent insulation on top of the ground. As we already know from physics, loose, fluffy snow is an excellent natural heat insulator due to the large amount of immobile air trapped between the snowflake crystals. Up to 90% of the volume of snow is air, the best insulator. Snow worked like natural foam created by winter itself to provide protection against winter. It's a paradox, but it's true. The inhabitants of the camp or village purposefully and methodically shoveled additional snow onto the walls of their dwellings, consciously creating a high and dense artificial snowdrift around the entire perimeter of the building. Such a man-made snow wall could reach a height of 3 feet or more, almost to the roof. It completely blocked the direct wind at the approaches and reduced the loss of precious heat through the lower part of the house to an absolute minimum due to the insulation. The higher the snow wall, the warmer it was inside, a direct relationship that everyone understood from experience without the need for thermometers or complex calculations. This method of snow embankment was especially vital for mobile dwellings, such as the tepees of nomadic tribes or the wigwams of sedentary tribes, where the lower edge of the leather covering didn't physically fit perfectly tightly to the uneven ground without gaps. Snow embankments around the perimeter sealed this vulnerable area of heat loss tightly. As a result, cold air from outside couldn't penetrate inside through the gaps at the base, and warm air from inside couldn't escape outside in the same way. Snow was both a sealant and an insulator, a dual function of a single material that worked around the clock without the need for any maintenance. In regions with very deep snow cover, for example in the subarctic taiga zone, semi-underground or completely underground winter dwellings were sometimes built for maximum protection. A significant depression was dug in the ground, anywhere from 3 to 6 feet deep, over which a low wooden roof frame was erected for support. All of this was completely covered with a thick layer of loose earth and dense snow, several feet thick, resulting in a very warm and well-protected shelter from the wind, almost invisible from the outside. Such a dwelling was practically an igloo made of earth and snow served as building materials, creating a structure where the internal temperature hovered around 0 degrees Celsius, even when the outside temperature plummeted to 30 degrees. This 30-degree difference was achieved through insulation several meters thick. The entrance to these dwellings was also carefully designed, considering the eventual buildup of snow. Often, a long tunnel-like corridor or vestibule, several meters in length, was constructed in front of the main entrance, utilizing branches and stretched animal skins. During the winter months, this corridor would become completely enveloped in snow, reaching the ceiling and transforming into a genuine snow tunnel with solid walls. This tunnel acted as an exceptional airlock, effectively blocking the entry of frigid air into the living space. The vestibule served as a trap for the cold air, preventing it from reaching the inhabitants inside. In this way, snow, a potentially dangerous and formidable element, was cleverly repurposed into a beneficial building and insulating material. The ability to skillfully utilize the unique insulating properties of snow was a crucial survival skill in the Arctic. It allowed even a modest dwelling to be transformed into a robust winter fortress, providing a comfortable living environment for months on end. Through knowledge and ingenuity, a potential enemy was turned into an ally. Snow was no longer a curse, but a blessing for those who knew how to harness its power. These straightforward yet ingenious techniques demonstrate that complex, inaccessible technologies and expensive imported materials are not always necessary for effective home insulation. Sometimes the most effective solutions are readily available, right under our feet, in the ground, and snow surrounding us.